interesting Instagram by the same name, basically dedicated to canoeing and camping and being in the bush. And when she posts pictures or videos, it takes me right back to my Ontario roots, because I grew up in Ontario. And Ontario, for the Americans who are listening, I think it's kind of like the Minnesota of Canada, right? It's canoe central.
Yeah.
It's boundary waters, except the whole bloody province is boundary waters. You really could put a canoe in anywhere in Ontario and end up
Yeah.
anywhere else.
Hmm.
So I'm
Yeah.
proud to welcome a fellow Ontarianian who's now living in San Francisco. What are you doing in San
Hmm.
Francisco?
I'm here for a new job. I work in technology, so obviously I was going to come out to Silicon Valley at some point, and have been loving all the backpacking opportunities here, and might do a little whitewater kayaking. But I definitely miss being in Ontario and having so many rivers at my disposal.
I will definitely say the hiking in California is really good.
Yeah.
You've got to be considering the parts of the Pacific Crest Trail at some point if you're doing all the hiking there.
Yeah, I probably won't do any section of the trail anytime soon. Just the permit is so competitive to get, and there are so many other trails. And I've got an idea eventually, maybe doing the whole Pacific Crest Trail. Like, I want to keep that as an option, or at least the John Muir Trail. So for now, I'm kind of leaving those off the radar and focusing on some of the shorter trails. I'm also limited in how much time I can take off work. So
Yeah, I'll see
yeah.
you all in 6 months. I'm going to take a stab at this, and then I'll probably follow it up with the Appalachian Trail. But let's
Oh,
talk.
nice.
No.
Oh,
That's fantasy land.
oh man, I thought you were saying you might consider doing that.
Oh, I
Oh,
am
that would be
considering. I'm
amazing.
trying to figure out how to
Yeah.
rearrange my life, but there are a
Hmm.
whole lot of trips that
Yeah.
I'd love to do, and
Hmm.
I think I got to head back to the Northwest Territories or Nunavut.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
That's really my jam.
Too
But
many trips, so little time.
yeah, it in my perfect world, I think I'd spend a month or two a year on the beach somewhere south, and then I'd spend 3 months a year uh, up north,
Hmm.
basically northern Canada. Maybe I'd venture into Alaska.
Ooh. Okay.
But
Yeah.
um, so what got you interested in canoeing? I mean, I'm assuming the standard story for everybody who canoes in Ontario is they went to canoe camp. I went to camp
Yeah.
big.
No, that's exactly it. I went to Camp Queen Elizabeth, which is a YMCA camp on Beausoleil Island in Georgian Bay. I started going there when I was 7 and really got into canoeing through that. Was a camp counselor eventually, then became their the actual job title is Voyager Tripper, which is where the name came from. But I was the person that led the multi-week canoe trips for the camp, and then that became canoe guiding for other places and a lot of whitewater guiding, and that's how I got into it. So you hit the nail on the head. Got into it through camp.
So what is it for you, or why do you think that canoeing is so addictive an activity? I have my theory, but I'd like to hear yours first.
I think there are two reasons, and I'll separate flat water canoeing from whitewater canoeing because I don't find flat water canoeing to be nearly as addictive.
Hmm.
What I love about whitewater canoeing specifically is that every river, even if from a high level they look similar, like there are just veins of blue running through the bush, every river is so different and every rapid presents its own challenges. And I find that I love a challenge. I love improving my own technical abilities. So being presented with different rapids throughout a canoe trip and how am I going to get down this? How am I going to build my skills to be a better paddler and a more technically proficient paddler? Like, I love that part of it because I feel like I'm always improving my skills. So that's why I like whitewater canoeing specifically, but just canoe tripping in general. I really like that you can go a very long time. Like, I guess you can also do that with backpacking, but there's something so nice about being able to plan a 2-week canoe trip. All of your food can fit into a barrel. It can go, you don't have to carry it on your back the whole time. And you can really get away from people in a way that I even think you can't always get with backpacking. Because when you're up on the Missinaibi River and you're 200 kilometers from anything, like that is real solitude. And you don't even need to be that far away from people. Like you can get that in Temagami or like really a lot of places in Ontario or throughout Canada and even parts of the US. Like you're just so isolated that you can really disconnect in a way that you can also do with other types of outdoor activity. But I feel like canoe tripping is just one where you get it a little bit more. And there's such a community around canoe tripping, especially in Ontario, that people love chatting about gear, people love planning trips together, sharing routes. Like there's such an energy about it that also makes it a little bit addicting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the differentiating the sort of the whitewater aspect, which either can be tremendous fun, tremendously challenging, or just plain terrifying, uh, from the other aspect. I think for me, it's getting into places that are basically impossible to get to. I mean, I don't find the motion of canoe. Some people get like metaphysical about the repetition of the motion, and sure, it's good exercise, but it's really about getting to places where you can't get any other way.
Yeah.
It's you could walk through the bush for 25 days, or you could paddle for a single day, and you could walking through the bush. People have this vision of like these open forests, maybe like these California open forests or forests they've seen in Lord of the Rings, but it's a whole lot more Mirkwood and a lot less, elven open forests.
Yeah. And another thing I would say is that with backpacking, trails do feel sometimes a little bit arbitrary. And I know a lot of the trails in Ontario and parts of the United States as well are based on Indigenous routes. So they did have significance. That doesn't always translate to where we are today. So I don't always know the historical significance of the trail I'm on. And some trails don't have any significance to them. They're just designed to be a place that people want to go. Whereas with a river or with a series of lakes, that's like a river is a natural body. It's like I'm going to start where the river starts and I'm going to end where the river ends. And I like that about it. And with lakes, there's so much creativity because you're deciding like, okay, I'm going to get into this lake and I can either exit here or I could exit over here. You can design all these different routes about it. So I like that element of canoe tripping, that it's either kind of following something that's so concretely a route, or you have the creativity to kind of create your route from scratch.
So then what's the closest call you've ever had in whitewater?
It was Graveyard Rapids on the Missinaibi. I was a canoe guide, so this was my first like big trip that I was doing for campers, and this would have been in 2017. And Graveyard Rapids, in hindsight, we shouldn't have paddled it.
I paddled the Missinaibi 1.5 times. I'm trying to remember Graveyard Rapids. I remember the name, but I don't remember the rapids.
It's like 3 or 4 days from Missinaibi Lake. And it's essentially, the entire rapid is about 1.2 kilometers. The first little part is a class 3, usually. It's got a few really big waves. I'm seeing it in my head right now. A few really big waves, and then it makes a really sharp turn. And then the second part of it is a constricting that becomes a wave train C2. No rocks there, nothing like too technical, but the waves are quite big. And then it bends again into more of a C2. And then eventually it goes into a C1 that kind of just rides out. But it is quite long. It's 1.2 kilometers. And you can't scout the full rapid because the portage trail doesn't go along the rapid. It's very steep on both sides, especially in that class 2 section where the river constricts. So we were able to scout the top of it, so the C3 part of it and the first half of the C2. And there were clear eddies for us to get out. So I should back up a moment. We looked at the portage trail. There was so much mud that when I was scouting it, at one point I went down to my waist in mud.
I vaguely remember. Is the portage trail on the left side?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
and it's 1.4 kilometers, so muddy, very steep in sections. So
before we go on, we're going to totally nerd out. I think you need to explain what class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 is, because it's not like rock. It's similar to a rock climbing system, but different.
Yeah. So rapids are classed starting with a swift, which is just, well, you already know this, but for the listeners, swifts are the easiest. That's like a little bit of whitewater, some waves. The water's moving and there's current, but there's no exposed rocks or big waves. And the hardest would be a class 6, which is essentially just a waterfall. And then each of the classes in between that get progressively harder. And they're characterized both on the volume of water. So the more water and the more gradient will make it a more difficult rapid. And also the technicality that's required. So some rapids, it's just you might be going down and there's just a big drop and then it continues. That's a lot of volume, but you could just hit it with a straight line and go down and it would be fine. Other rapids are really technical in that there are holes, which is where you've got recirculating water that could trap a canoe or a person. You've got rocks that could be involved that you could hit and that could tip or pin a canoe. So when there's a lot going on, that makes it a more difficult rapid as well. And often if there's a very specific route you need to take down the rapid, we would say it's technical. So you could have a class 2 technical rapid. So in an open boat canoe, typically the highest we would paddle on an expedition would be a class 3. And that's only under specific circumstances. So if a class 3 above a waterfall would never run. A class 3 when there's a big pool at the bottom and it's early in the day and the kids feel enthusiastic about it, maybe we'll take the gear out of the boat and run it. Sometimes we'll play around in class 3s, but that's really like the edge of our comfort zone. We would never do a class 4 with campers. I might do them with friends if it's short and we're like just playing around for the day and we're not on an expedition. But that's kind of where my comfort lies. I class 2 with campers or with my peers. Like if I'm with my peers, we'll usually just go down those ones, maybe some boat scouting, maybe some shore scouting, not always. With kids, definitely scouting a class 2 rapid. And a class 1, you kind of see the end of it usually, or there's not that much going on, so you just go down. Not much scouting is required. So that's how I think about the classes of rapids on a canoe trip without kids.
Do you factor in, like I often talk about, this is a class 2 rapid with class 4 consequences, or this is the example that you gave of a simple rapid above a waterfall. You know, might be a class 2 rapid with class 6 consequences. Class 6 being you do everything right and you might not die.
Interesting. When I'm looking at a rapid in order to give its classification, I usually include the consequences at the end into what I would consider the rapid to be.
Right.
But I kind of like the way that you're communicating that better. Like it's a class 2, like the actual rapid itself is a class 2, but there's a waterfall at the end, so you might die. Like that's very different than a class 2 that ends in a pool. So yeah, okay. That is something that we definitely keep in mind though when we're deciding if we're going to run a rapid, especially with kids.
So you're back to Graveyard Rapids on the Missinaibi.
Yeah.
Grade 3 opening, and then grade 2, and then down to basically Swift, grade 1.
No, exactly. And so we spent a long time scouting the class 3, and we figured if we can get down that section, everyone eddies out as they need to. That's really the part of the rapid that we're concerned about. The remaining 2, like my kids were great at whitewater. Once we were past that section, we were able to scout more of it. So we were like, oh, we'll get out. We can scout the remaining class 2. From what we've read from the guidebook and what we can see from here, it looks pretty fine. So we did the class 3, first 4 boats, excellent. The last boat, they'd already completed the eddy. Like they left the current, they were eddying out, and they tilted their hips as you do when you're exiting a rapid. But they were so excited that they had made it through the rapid that they just tilted way too far. The boat flips in the eddy. They swim out to shore. I'm like frantic, try and grab the boat before it goes down the rapid, but did not get there fast enough, and goodbye boat. So the boat went down the rapid without us, which on its own, inconvenient, but not the end of the world, until we realized that we had switched boats at the last moment. I had switched into another camper's boat to try and balance out the skill a bit, leaving our satellite phone in the other boat, which is now going down the rapid. So I take the strongest paddler and we beeline down the next section of the rapid. We get to the boat. It's pinned on a rock. Easy enough. I've got my ropes. We paddle out to it. I have so much respect for this camper that helped me do this. He was new to whitewater, but did it so enthusiastically and had so much skill and strength that we were able to paddle up the current, get right into it. There was some carabiner action. There was some webbing anchored to a tree. We were able to shake the boat free. All of that went beautifully. It was going to be a great little rescue, great day. Everything's going well. We've done that, finished, we're chilling on the side. And I can see the next 3 boats coming down. 2 of them have 3 people in them though, because we've got their extra boat. And I can see them coming down, and the boat that has 3 campers in it then tips. And they didn't have anything to tip on. It was just when you've got 3 people in a boat, you're so tippy. And I can just see them tip over. And now the 3 of them are in the but they're in the middle of the rapid in a class 2, safe enough to swim. Like there was nothing in the river. I would never have ran a rapid if there was an obstacle that could cause someone harm. They're all in life jackets. They've got their helmets. They've swam in rapids before. So technically they're fine, but they're really startled and very panicked. And they're flailing in the water. And so I grab the boy in my boat and, okay, we're paddling alongside them, and I'm calling out to them, like, just keep your feet up. You're almost through the rapid. It's going to be okay. You're doing fine. And they all exit the rapid at different points. So I've got one over here, one over here, one over here, tears everywhere, panic in their eyes, so much fear. They're fine, but it's a scary situation. And I still have 2 more boats at the top. So by this point, I've got one boat on the opposite shore of a rapid. I've got my boat at the end, or right before the C1 section, so basically the end of the rapid. My co-guide and his boat and the other campers, they've all pulled off to the shore and are walking their boats down the side so as to not cause more drama. So I've got 4 campers here, a co-guide here, boats everywhere, campers everywhere. And from there, it was
yard
just
sale.
Yeah. And there wasn't a lot of danger involved. There wasn't any danger involved. But I did have lots of panicked people everywhere throughout this rapid. So it just then turned into 3 hours of essentially just shuttling people to get them where they needed to be. Like walking up the side of this very steep, because the river constricts, there's no way to walk on land. So I'm like walking on the side of the rapid, ferry across, get the other boat with my guide so each of us can paddle one down, ferry over to grab a camper, bring them down. And it was, at the end of the day, it was like 6.5 hours. We should have just portaged. Even if I had to drag people through the mud, it was not a good call. I've learned a lot since then. I would not make that call again and run that rapid. But everything was fine. It just delayed us a day. We took a rest day the next day to kind of give everyone a break and allow them to catch their breath. And then we made up for it later. But yeah,
it's hard to come back from that as a little bit as a guide. I mean, I've had a couple of yard sales as a when I was canoe guiding or raft guiding, and it's I mean, really, the people's confidence in you is paramount. And even though you might know this isn't serious, this is inconvenient, this isn't serious, because you wouldn't have put them into a serious situation, it still rattles. They don't really have an independent way of knowing how serious is this. And
no, that's an excellent point. And I think when I look back on it, and actually even in the moment, when it was going on, that was the first time I'd done all this training on how to handle rapid situations and rescues. But that was the first time I really got to use all of those skills at once. And I remember as soon as I saw the boat tipping, I thought, this is going to be a disaster. So I can either panic and that'll ooze into everyone, or you just take it one task at a time, think rationally, stay calm, but also validate the experiences that the kids are having, because the worst thing is to say, you're fine. Like, they're not going to hear that. They need empathy and they need support, and they just need to know that you're there for them and that you're going to get them through. So as I went through that whole rescue, I'm proud to say it, which is why I'm going to talk about it. I kept my cool the whole time. And I had campers crying, but we got them through it. And we took that next rest day, or I should say after we got to our campsite, we did debrief with everyone, and then we did one-on-one check-ins. And I actually think, and I've heard some of this feedback from my campers, that having that experience, especially at the beginning of the trip, gave them a lot of confidence that whatever happened, my co-guide and I could take care of them. And it actually improved the bond that we had on trip. So as we moved throughout the trip, we took like a few, the next day, once we were paddling again, we took the rapids really carefully. But within 2 days, they were like, no, let's paddle everything. Let's do it big. Like, guys, just because we saved you once doesn't mean we can be irresponsible. But I don't think it had any lasting damage.
I see a line. Gosh.
You know what? That really amazing camper that I talked about who I was paddling with, he actually looked at Thunderhouse Falls and said, I don't know, Mikaela, I feel like we could figure it out. Like, yeah. Love the confidence. We definitely couldn't, but nice.
I'm sure low water in a playboat, and you're willing to take. So what we're talking about here is the centerpiece of the Missinaibi, where the whole river falls off the Canadian Shield onto the Hudson Bay lowlands through a spectacular series of cataracts. And
a lot of people have died, though, paddling through it. I wouldn't risk it.
Yeah, there's the stuff that you would do playboating, right? Which is these little tiny boats where they're decked out with airbags, where you're strapped in, where if you flip, you can roll them up. Like, these are canoes, not kayaks, but you can roll them like kayaks. And I've paddled, grade 4, maybe easy grade 5 in those things back in the day. Mm-hmm. And it's just a different world. Like, if you're on an expedition, I mean, it just, if nothing else, say you're going to survive. The amount of gear, that, especially if you're on an expedition by yourself, that if you need to replace everything, I on my first long solo trip, which started down the Missinaibi, I was adding up how much the canoe cost, plus the tent, plus the sleeping bag, plus the emergency location transmitter. And I was like, I forget what the number was. Let's call it $12,000. I was like, if I lose all this stuff, I'm going to have to pay $12,000 to replace it. And that actually got me walking a lot. But if you're out boating with friends, on a, I don't know, on the Petawawa or something, or the Ottawa River, that's a different world.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just so inconvenient to have to go and chase after your boat, especially on a long trip, or chase after your gear.
Yeah. So there's two big philosophies in whitewater in wilderness tripping. Three. One is to tie all your gear in so that all the bags stay with your boat. The other is to have all your gear loose so that it's easier to empty your boat out. And the third is to kind of put a long line through all your bags so that it stays with your boat. But now you've got this, 3 bags and a barrel attached to your canoe by a rope. Which of those philosophies do you subscribe to? I need to know this to know if we can be friends.
So a variation on number 1. I've seen people who actually use webbing to like strap in their bags so that nothing moves. I don't like that because if the boat gets pinned, it's really inconvenient to get it out again. There is something to say that it displaces water, and I hear the arguments. I also don't like to have everything loose though, because I don't like chasing after things. So my thing is to just use a carabiner to any dry bags. They just get clipped in so that if the boat did flip and I need to get the stuff out, it's really easy to undo. For the barrels, I'll use the hip straps and just hip strap around the yoke or around the thwart. And that's also really easy so everything stays together, but it's easy to undo if I need to, because I've tipped a boat and it's pinned. So that's what I do. But I don't really have a strong opinion about it. So if I'm paddling with someone else that does have a really strong opinion, that's not the hill that I die on. I'll just let them do what they want to do.
I'm a tie everything in. I think it comes from having done years of playboating, which again, these little canoes where every square inch that you're not filling up is filled up with foam and airbags. So a heavy bag of food might weigh 100 pounds, but it's still a lot lighter than if that same bag were full of water.
Yeah,
it can be 300 pounds, 400 pounds. So I'm very much of the displacement theory. making it to the bottom of a rapid with your boat full of water, but the bag's still kind of keeping you upright it's not a good situation, but it's a
Yeah.
situation.
One paddling partner I have, the two of us like to do, we don't like to scout, and we are very okay with swamping our boat, which is where it just fills with water. So I have a lot of videos of us like, we didn't scout this, it was harder than we thought, and we went this way, we went that way. Water came over the sides. You can see the bags floating in the water as our gunnels are underwater. We're like, we will make it to the shore. We're like fighting through. So I'm a big believer in like, if you just keep paddling, you will get to the end of the rapid eventually. You just need to stay upright. That's the only goal. Water in the boat, fine. Just stay upright and keep moving forward.
What about spray decks? So for the people who don't know, that's like, imagine like a kayak, the skirt that people wear that they then snap over the edges to stop water from coming in. So there's so the lighter version of that for especially expedition canoeing is basically a nylon cover that covers up your boat. It's not going to allow you to go underwater, but if waves are coming over, most of the water will not go in your boat, and it keeps you a bit warmer in the cold. I'm a huge fan, but I've not seen any of it on your Instagram.
Yeah, and that comes down to the fact that I do not own a canoe.
Oh.
I move around a lot. I don't have a car, and I live in a tiny apartment that doesn't have storage. So I've never owned my own canoe. My canoeing partner, the one that I did a few trips with, who we like going through big stuff, he just at that point didn't own one. I think he's since purchased one. And our most recent trip on the Des Moines, like another boat had a spray deck, and we were envious because they would plow through things and we would have to bail. So I definitely would like a spray deck. At this point, I've used them once, but haven't really had the opportunity to, just because I'm kind of dependent on the boats that are available to me.
For sure.
So a canoe is on the list once I've decided where I'm going to live.
Yeah. Well,
and have gotten the car.
So then, I mean, a lot of people are really intimidated about, they see cool stories. They see, pictures of you doing some trip on, I don't know, the Spanish River. Or they see people doing wild expeditions up north, and they want to get started. And we're not talking kids anymore. I don't think, I mean, outside of Ontario and maybe Minnesota, there aren't that, the whole growing up paddling is an anomaly. That's really an Ontario thing, maybe a Quebec thing. So how would you suggest to somebody who's, 30 years old and they have it in their head to, paddle the Yukon River one day? Where do they start and not drown?
So, that's actually the number 2 subsection of my audience are people who never had camp and want to get into canoeing because they see these cool YouTubers who are doing these cool trips and they go, how can I do that myself? Is it even possible? Or did I miss the boat because I never went to camp? And I tell them you most definitely did not miss the boat. The boat is here. It is a canoe. You just need to get into it. I tell people one is, it kind of depends what your goals are. So if someone's goal is to paddle whitewater, I have slightly different advice for them for how they should get started. But if someone just wants to start taking their first canoe trips, I usually start with, have you been camping before? Have you done car camping? Because sleeping in a tent, making your own food over a fire, like, get the basics down first. You only need to do one car camping trip to kind of get the idea. You set up the tent, you set up your sleeping pad, your sleeping bag, there you go. You make some food over the fire. Get that first experience. Then when it comes to actually planning a canoe trip, I think it sounds intimidating because it's a lot of new gear, but call an outfitter or call a canoe rental place in Algonquin and just they can provide you with all the equipment you need, the canoe, the paddles, the life jacket, and if you need it, they can even help you choose a route that doesn't have a lot of portaging, that maybe only has a few kilometers of paddling, and you really just need to do one. If you have any friends who have done it before, they bring them with you, they can kind of show you the way, but even if you don't have any friends, it's really intuitive once you get out there. There's a few basic safety things you need to know, but as long as you're following those safety things, like always wearing your life jacket, not paddling when it's dark, being careful with lake crossings when it's windy, and being careful about water temperature. Once you've handled those things, canoeing is really intuitive. You just need to get in the boat. People who don't even know how to paddle, like, they figure it out. It's pretty intuitive. Watch a YouTube video. You can do it. Cross the lake. Experienced canoeists like to complain about people who don't know how to portage. At the end of the day, those people are just being annoying. Let people figure it out.
Everybody was a beginner at some point.
Exactly. So if someone, like, you get to the portage, all you know is that you need to get your gear from here to there. If it takes you 7 trips, well, one time it took me 7 trips to do a portage. I have a whole story about it. So, like, everyone starts somewhere. So you just need to start, like, once you do that first trip, I feel like there's a huge unlock in people where they realize, oh, this is actually way easier than I thought it was going to be. You just need to get the first one done. And if people are really reluctant or apprehensive about doing that first one on their own, then I say, just do one guided canoe trip. I've got a lot of great outfitters that I can recommend that really focus on the education piece. And once they've done it once, then people can really start doing it on their own. Whitewater is a little bit different because there's a lot more risk involved and there's a lot more skill involved.
Very technical things that you need to know how to do and that are much harder to figure out intuitively.
Yeah. So for that one, I have like a whole separate set of advice. Mm-hmm. But for someone who just wants to start canoeing, that's where I say to start. Yeah. You really just need to get that first one done, and then it's a rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So
it's funny with the, just talk to an outfitter. I was working for Rick Driediger, which is Churchill River Canoe Outfitters in northern Saskatchewan for a summer.
Oh, are you thinking of doing the Churchill?
Oh, I have done the Churchill.
Oh my gosh, that one's on my to-do list.
Mostly a series of big lakes. There's some cool whitewater, but mostly a series. I'll send you the blog post I did.
Amazing.
grapplers.com/solo, which started out on Churchill, but I was guiding mostly on the Churchill, and some Germans got in touch with my boss, and they were like, "We want a guide, we want a canoe, we want a tent, we want food." I think it was the Fond du Lac, which is a really nice river in northern Saskatchewan, and I was up. And I was super excited because I'd gone up the Fond du Lac at that point, but I'd never gone down the Fond du Lac. Mm-hmm. I was like, it'd be nice to actually go with the current one time. And then when they're 2 days out, I've got all the food ready. I'm all ready to go. And they're like, and they'd already paid. And they're like, no, we just meant like a written guide to the river, not a guide to come with us.
Oh.
So he gave them a break on the price, and I didn't get to go on the trip. Man. There was confusion about what the word guide meant, and I was very disappointed. But I think taking a guided trip is a really good idea. And probably the best advice for people who want to get into whitewater is take a whitewater course. Yes, unless 100%. You've got friends who are... there's a danger in having friends teach you if they don't know sort of the pedagogy of it. If they've been doing it for so long, they might be teaching you really dumb things. They might actually be good at it.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk kind of worst case scenarios and dangers? You mentioned, lake crossings, and I think that's one of my bugaboos. I think way more people not many people die paddling, but of the people that do die, most of them die on lakes, not in rapids and not eaten by bears.
Yeah. Very few are eaten by bears.
So why don't we go down some of the, I don't know, what you would imagine people's top 5 or top 7 boogeymen of this would be. I'm going to ask you to talk about lakes first, because that's, from experience, that's my boogeyman.
Yeah. So for any listeners who are not super familiar, one of the most dangerous components of flat water canoeing are these big lake crossings, specifically when there's a lot of wind, because canoes are open and they don't handle the rocking motion of big waves very well. They get very tippy when they've got a lot of waves coming at them, especially if the canoe gets broadside. So if the waves are coming at your hull, it's very easy for a canoe to start tipping side to side. And that's how people tip. So even extremely experienced canoeists, if they've got a really big lake to cross and the forecast says there's going to be a lot of wind, they won't paddle. They call those wind days. There are some canoe routes where you actually factor in a few extra days that could be rest days, but most likely they're days where you just stay at your campsite because you're, quote, wind bound, meaning that you can't, there's just too much wind, the waves are too big, your boat just can't get across the lake. So that is a potentially dangerous situation for novice canoeists to be in because they don't always recognize just how dangerous large lakes and wind together can be. So they'll set off, and near the shore, the wind always feels less than what it does when you're in the center of the lake. But then you end up in the center of the lake, far from shore. You're being sloshed around by these waves. Eventually, a big wave comes and your boat tips over, and now you're in the water. And in the summer, if you're wearing your life jacket and you know how to do a canoe over canoe rescue and you're with someone else, that doesn't have to be the end of the day. It's hugely inconvenient and it's potentially dangerous. But in a lot of situations, you could be okay. Where it can be really dangerous is if, one, people aren't wearing life jackets, which unfortunately a lot of people still think life jackets don't apply to them. Or if you're in cold water, it doesn't take very cold temperatures for hypothermia to set in. So a lot of the drownings that have happened, people don't actually die from drowning. They actually die from hypothermia. There are a few cases of that in Algonquin Park over the last few years. So that is a potentially dangerous thing that flatwater canoeists face, that if you're not experienced, you don't even know that you don't know how to paddle those lakes. So that's a thing that...
And it's amazing how quickly wind can come up. I remember being on Lake Superior and it going from it being quite a nice day to just, you're going to die if you stay out here. And we put in on a small island that was maybe, I don't know, the size of a baseball diamond, just rock with no trees, and stayed. And we were maybe 200 yards from shore. And we stayed there for 3 days because we couldn't paddle the 200 yards to shore. And in 20 minutes, it went from calm. Yeah. So anytime you're more than, I'll say, 20 minutes from some kind of landfall, that's really a pucker factor. Yeah. And I don't like it at all. If I'm doing it, I'm wearing my fleece layer. I'm wearing my raincoat over it to make a wetsuit. I'm going early in the day, late at night, watching the sky and just, not panicking, but you're very motivated to get out of there.
It's not the point where you can just kind of leisurely paddle and daydream at the same time. Definitely engages all of your senses. Yeah.
What about bears, Mikaela? Bears. I'm afraid of bears. I heard a story once about a bear eating somebody, or was it bears with porridge? I forget.
So, yeah, I think bears are probably the question I get asked about the most. What if there are bears? And I think the biggest distinction I think I want people to understand is that there is a very big difference between bears in the wild and bears that are habituated to getting food from humans. So when I'm paddling somewhere or I'm hiking somewhere that doesn't have a lot of human activity, bears never cross my mind. Sometimes I'll see them and they look at me curiously, and that's the extent of the interaction. You still want to be smart about your campsite. You don't leave food out. You have proper bear storage. Keep your campsite clean. Don't clean fish at your campsite. And bears, if you follow that, bears will leave you alone. They do not care about you. On the other hand, in a place like Algonquin or any of these really popular canoe destinations where you get lots of people and lots of people who are not knowledgeable on what to do to avoid bears, or just people who are disrespectful. You'll have people who leave garbage all around their campsite. They leave food out. And the bears get used to recognizing humans and campsites lead to food. And those are the bears that are much more confident. They're much more willing to walk right up to people at their campsite and be a little bit more confrontational. There's still very, very few cases of bears being overly aggressive. And there's a lot of myths about, like, do bears respond differently if you have a dog with you? Do bears respond differently if you're solo versus if you're in groups? There's not a lot of research on it, so I'm not going to quote any of that because we don't really know, or Maybe some bear scientists do know, and they can correct me on that later. But from a practicality standpoint, the time you need to be the most cautious about where you're leaving your food is if you are in a provincial park that has a lot of, or any park that has a lot of human activity. And that's where you need to be especially diligent about not leaving any food out, keep a very clean campsite, and bears should leave you alone. If you do have a bear that comes wandering close, making lots of noise, making yourself really big, like those do work. Most bears are not going to confront a loud, large, moving person making lots of noise, especially if you're with multiple people. So it kind of comes down to a game of statistics. I mean, there's every once in a while, I couldn't give you the stat off the top of my head. It's very, very small. There is a negative confrontation with a bear and a human in a park. But I like to say you are much, much more likely to be injured on the 401 highway than you ever are with a bear if you are smart about it. So out of all the things to be afraid about in the backcountry, getting lost and getting injured are more legitimate fears than bears, in my mind.
I've had a lot of people ask me about carrying guns in the wilderness, and I think it's different when you're in grizzly country and polar bear country.
Yes.
Personally, I think if you go into polar bear country without a gun, you're an idiot.
100%.
But there was an interesting study. I wish I could. I'll link it on the in the show notes of where they looked at bear confrontations where the person had a rifle or a handgun versus where they had bear spray, and the bear spray came out at a much higher percentage. And I think in part it's just it's really hard to fumble bear spray. You know, you create this big noxious cloud of orange gas that's horrendous for everybody, usually yourself as well. But you know, it's hard to miss. Bears are super olfactory, and honestly, I mean, unless you're a really good shot, to try and hit a charging bear in a way that's going to stop it at close range, because you're not going to be, oh look, there's a bear 400 yards away, let me plink at it. It's going to be charging you, and it's 10 feet away, and good luck. You know, bear spray is kind of like the ultimate, I don't know, shotgun, because it just hits everything. That bear spray had a much higher, much more positive outcome percentage than handguns or I forget if it was handguns and rifles, firearms.
Yeah, now that I'm in California, I do have bear spray, but I never carried it when I was in Ontario.
Really?
Nope.
Why in California? Are you worried about mountain lions? You
know what? I wasn't worried about mountain lions, but now I'm going to be. I
just had a friend from work last year got stalked by a mountain lion coming down a trail in British Columbia.
In British Columbia, they're my biggest fear. I've had a few cases where I've been hiking alone in British Columbia, and I've never had an interaction, but a few trailheads will say, like, just so you know, there's cougar activity there, and I'm by myself. I hope my parents never see this. That's their biggest fear. And it's terrifying. I mean, nothing's ever happened, but that's the thing I'm most aware of, like, because they sit in trees, they're very quiet. If anyone's going to be afraid of things, be afraid of mountain lions. But thankfully, there aren't a lot of places where you get canoeing and mountain lions, thankfully. So if you're canoeing, you should be safe from those. There is some grizzly activity, though, in the mountains. And I hate to say this because this is naive of me to say. I also carry bear spray because of I'm a female that solo backpacks. And when I got to California, it's much more populated. It's more likely I'm going to see men on the trail. So I just feel more comfortable carrying bear spray with me.
Well, that's probably one of the next questions that I get from female listeners and watchers is like, but I'm a chick, but I'm female. Do I have to be worried? There aren't a lot of horror stories about that, but it's got to be, as you said, it clearly is sort of in your mind as you're out there hiking alone.
Definitely on my mind. And it's something that I think about when I'm thinking about where I'm going to backpack. Actually, 2 months ago, I canceled a trip because there had been police reports about a man who was squatting partway on the trail and was approaching couples and solo females in a very intimidating way. The police eventually went out. I think he was arrested because of some shady activity. But that was enough for me to say, this trail, not this weekend. So definitely there are stories of it happening, and it's something to definitely be aware of, though I still don't think it's something that means that women can't be out in the woods on their own. Because again, it's very rare, and if you take the proper precautions and you're diligent about your own safety and plan things ahead, I have a lot of tips for it. But as long as you do those things, you should be fine. It's similar to a bear where it's like no one can tell you 100% you won't get attacked by a bear, but the statistics are so low that, again, if you drive on the highway, so more likely something will happen there than will happen on the trail. So I live my life by statistics. Brings me some comfort.
A mathematically oriented person, which I guess makes sense working in tech.
Yeah.
I remember being in northern Manitoba, like, I don't know, 100 kilometers away from the Northwest Territories boundary in 2019. And that was when those two guys went on the murder rampage and drove across Canada, killing a bunch of people on the way. Then they drove down a 600-kilometer dirt road to a native reservation in Manitoba, like maybe the dumbest place that you could run to, because you are like, the two white guys in the village of 300 brown natives, all of whom know each other, and then they ran off into the bush. At that point, my satellite phone just blew up because it was with messages. Because people like, northern Manitoba. I was like, no, they're like 800 kilometers away. There's maybe, I don't know, 100 people in Canada who could cover that stretch of land. That's really rough terrain. And if you can't get a motorboat from there to here, and it's going to take them 3 weeks to get, like, I wasn't worried, but it did, like, you're paddling along, you haven't seen anybody for weeks, and you're like, it'd be awfully strange to run into two guys with a canoe out here. Like, it would just, hey, how are you doing? Just unholster my shotgun as we have a little conversation about, I mean, as it turned out, those guys ended up killing themselves, and I mean, it's a terrible story. But that's the closest I've come to encounters with madmen or criminals.
I've never had an encounter with a criminal or any kind of really sketchy behavior. I've encountered, especially around cottage country or Algonquin or anywhere that's like heavily populated.
Hey,
every
baby,
once in a
want
while,
to come
I'll
and hang
run
out?
into,
Have some beer here?
Yeah, I run into a group of like rowdy men in their 20s that maybe have had a little bit too much to drink and are being loud and making some comments that make me uncomfortable, or making some comments that are making my young female campers uncomfortable. That's never appreciated. But that's about the extent of it. So I've been very fortunate in that sense. And part of the reason why I like backpacking and canoeing, or just doing things in the wilderness in Ontario, is that I felt you could get so much distance in between people. And like, what are the odds that there are going to be crazy people and this far into the bush?
It's a self-selection activity. Like, by and large, people who are doing that are generally going to be good people. I mean,
But then here, it's like it's just so California is so densely populated, and I'm doing relatively short trails. It's like, I got here in 5 hours. Someone else very easily could. Are they a good person? I don't know. So nothing's happened. I take all the safety precautions I need to, but I do feel a little bit better having my bear spray on me, just in case.
Okay. Big lakes, bears, kind of, we'll call it, I don't know, sketchy people. What other questions do you get kind of in the safety?
Well, for a long time, my biggest fear in the wilderness was lightning, because I just didn't know what to do in those situations. I now know I have a much better understanding of how lightning works and where you go and how
you're out on a lake and you hear thunder in the distance. What do you do?
Number one is you get off the water. Most people find that pretty obvious. Then, and this is where I always had difficulty with lightning. The thing is, you don't want to be in an open space. You don't want to be the tallest thing, because the way that lightning works is when it leaves the clouds, it's looking for the first thing it's going to hit, which is usually something tall. So if you're the only one standing in a field, you've just become that tall thing. So don't be the tallest thing in the area. So get off the water, don't be in a field, don't be on the top of a mountain. But also don't be next to something that's really, really tall. So like if you see a really tall tree and you're thinking like, it will protect me from the rain. No, because that tree is going to get hit. And then it could either fall down and smush you, or the charge will go through the tree and spread out when it hits the branches and basically shower you in electricity. You don't want that either. So no open spaces. Don't be standing next to the tallest thing. So where does that leave you? A forest is kind of the best bet you have. So you got yourself into a forest, ideally around some trees that look pretty solid, but kind of odds at that point. You're out in the forest. You don't want to be directly on the ground, because when I
What
hope
do
I
you
get
mean
the science
directly
right.
on the ground?
The light, like
You don't want to be lying
if
down on
you're
the
bare
ground.
feet lying on the ground and the current so when lightning hits the ground, it doesn't just get the place that it touches, it kind of like
It
spreads out as well. You can tell I'm not a weather scientist. What I know is that you're not supposed to be lying down on the ground, and ideally you want something insulating in between you and the ground. So crouching on a life jacket or on a backpack or on a sleeping pad is great, but you want to limit the amount of contact you're making with the ground. And that's essentially the lighting position. Just no tall objects, don't be the tallest object, and minimize the amount of contact your body makes with the ground. The other things you need to keep in mind, though, are hypothermia, because if you're out there and it's raining and you're wet, I mean, there's not really much you can do about it in the moment, but it's something to be aware of, that as soon as the thunder has passed, you need to get warm and dry. And you need to just be cognizant of what's around you, because if anything gets hit or there's a lot of wind, you don't want anything falling on you. It's not a great explanation, because lightning is kind of tricky. Again, it kind of comes down to odds. Very few people are injured by lightning, and there's some statistics that very few people who are killed by lightning are killed by a direct strike. Like, it's not usually that you're struck by lightning. It's either cold exposure or something falling on you, or it's can't think off the top of my head what it's called, like a step current.
Step potential.
Step potential.
We deal with this in the fire department. If there's like a car into a power pole and the line comes down, if the person has to escape from the car, if they take a big step, now, I don't know if it, then the electricity will travel through their legs, basically up one leg, through their groin, abdomen, and then down the other leg.
Yeah.
That's easier than the ground. So if they do have to get out, and because the car is burning, take little shuffling steps with their feet together, so there's never a big, it's exactly what you were saying. Don't lie down.
Yeah.
Because if there's lightning strike above your head, it's going to go down, jump into your head, go down through your body and out your feet. So stand with your feet together, or crouch with your feet together, and limit the temptation of the lightning to go up one foot and down the other.
Yeah. So what other questions do I get?
How do you teach navigation? How do you teach getting lost? Like, I think I'm a pretty good navigator, but I have not found a great pedagogy for teaching people how to become good navigators. And I think that's just because I learned doing a lot of solo trips where you really have no choice but to figure it out. So I think one way to teach people how to navigate would be map, compass, wilderness, and go. And then you kind of get a survival. It'd be a survivor bias. The people who figure it out come out of the wilderness, and the people who don't figure it out never make it out. So that's kind of the Darwinian way of teaching it, which is how I learned. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to teach it, though.
Yeah, I have never been very good at navigating, and it's something I've definitely had to practice. And I think learning how to read a topographic map is important. It took me a while. I'm not great at spatial awareness, so it took me a long time to be able to look at what I was seeing with the contour lines and with the shape of land and be able to translate it from a 2D map to a 3D environment. there are probably hundreds of online courses and YouTube videos about it, but I found that the only way I really learned was to just have the map in front of me. Even when I'm not the one navigating, I like to have a map and to go, okay, that feature, I think it's that. And then I like compare them, I think about it, verify other factors about the environment, and try and like learn as I go with some almost like affirming, like, yes, I thought that was that thing, and it was. That's what those lines look like in the real world. So learning how to read a topographic map is important for figuring out where you are relative to everything else. And then it comes down to using a compass, which is where I kind of struggle. It took me a long time to figure out how to like set my bearing properly. Once you've got it, I would never be able to explain it to someone. I think it's now just something that I look at it and I know, oh yeah, I check what the map says and I make the adjustments, but I couldn't articulate that in a succinct way to someone else. So I would tell someone to watch a course. There are great YouTube videos on it, but then to just go out and practice, because that's how you actually end up getting better at it. And once you have those two things, that's pretty much all you need, I think. I mean, practice makes perfect, obviously. And I think we're a little bit spoiled with rivers and with trails, because as long as you stay on the trail, you're fine. As long as you stay on the river, you're fine. That you don't really realize you need to be practicing those skills until like, this lake does not look the way that it was supposed to look. And I have no idea where I am now because I wasn't paying attention. So it's
or the map was done 50 years ago and the shape of the lake has changed, or the shape of the river has changed. Is that or the water level has changed?
Canada is super guilty for that. Their topographic maps are not that good. But yeah, I think it's just something that people need to practice. So I got a Garmin InReach just last year. Prior to that, I'd never GPSed any of my trips. Just didn't have one. So I never really thought about it. Now I carry the Garmin InReach Mini, and I use it just as a safety thing. Like if I did get lost and really couldn't find my way out, I can just like SOS my location. But I don't use a GPS for navigation typically. Unless I'm using all trails because I'm on a hike, then I might use it. But on a canoe trip, no, I never use GPS.
I used to be of two minds about that, but then I talked to Will Gadd, who's a fairly famous ice climber, very famous ice climber. And he was basically saying, like, you're an idiot if you go out into the backcountry. I'm using slightly nicer words. But you're an idiot if you go out in the backcountry without one of these things, because if something goes wrong, if you break your leg, the amount of time and effort that people are going to spend looking for probably your corpse compared to being able to push your SOS button on your GPS and probably survive and just save
100%.
Save 50 rescuers, 50 rescuer days of people combing through the mountains or the whatever, trying to find your body.
Yeah.
That it's almost selfish not to carry it.
Yes.
I think to rely on it is also silly, because anything can run out of batteries, anything can break, anything can get lost.
Well, I think of it there being a distinction between using a GPS device as navigation and using it as an emergency tool. Like I always have carried a satellite phone, and that's something that I swear by. And I've taken very few trips in the backcountry where I haven't had a satellite phone, and I don't even like to talk about them because it was wildly irresponsible. It was back in my young 20s invincibility phase when I figured, I'm smart, nothing can happen to me. So I didn't carry one. And then I got into trouble, and I always carry one now.
What happened?
Because before I'd ever paddled whitewater, I fell into a river right above a small waterfall. I don't know if I would have survived if I had gone down it, but that kind of had nothing to do with navigation. But it really shook. I had just been like hiking in a place you weren't supposed to hike, really close to this steep section of a river, and everyone else traversed it fine, but I slipped and I went into the river, and it was a very narrow river. I'm like paddling for my life, and I grabbed a big rock and held on to it until I could catch my breath, and like someone helped me out of the river. Had that rock not been there, I would have gone over this. Maybe it was 5 or 6 meters high, very, very rocky, very fast water, lots of holes. If I had survived it, I definitely would have been very severely injured. And that kind of shook me out of you can't be an idiot. You got to think these things through. The risk was not worth the reward. I did not gain anything from doing that. All I did was terrify myself, terrify my friends, and I didn't get anything from it. And I really need to reevaluate how I think about decision making in the backcountry. And I'm a guide. Like, when I'm with my kids, I would never have thought to do this. Why is it different when it's me and other 20-year-olds? So that kind of gave me the little realignment I needed to go back to making good decisions in the backcountry. And now I think about everything. What are the risks? What can I do to mitigate every risk that's within my control, but still be out in the woods? And so having a satellite phone or something where I can call someone and say, I need help now, 100% every time. It's very important.
What we've talked about all the sort of scary, well, not all the scary things. I'm sure there are a couple more worst case scenarios that people are wishing I was asking. So I'll go there first. What else are people thinking? Like, oh, but what about, I don't know, starving to death? What about poison ivy? What about chopping my leg off while building a fire? What about forest fires? What are the next couple of questions that you get asked?
So most of the things you just said are not really questions I get. I did recently get a question about forest fires because the place I was supposed to be backpacking this past Saturday is now engulfed in a forest fire that started on Friday. So I'm glad it started on Friday and not while I was on the trail. But I don't have a good answer for what to do about forest fires. That was something I had never really thought about on a backpacking trail.
Have a canoe is the answer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in a canoe, it's like if you're in the center of a really big lake, I feel like you've got a little bit more wiggle room, but still, I've never encountered a forest fire on a canoe trip. So being asked, like, by people on Instagram, like, what if you had been out there? What would you have done? I realized I don't know. So I'm still, actually, fires. You should probably just tell me what I should do. But I wouldn't have known. So I'm very aware.
Don't try and run uphill.
Yeah.
Because they will burn faster uphill than you can run.
Yeah.
Especially in California.
Mm-hmm.
And try and find a dry and open, or like a non-combustible open area, and kind of keep those in the back of your mind. But I've only run into them in a canoeing context a couple of times, and it's worrying. I mean, you're glad that you have the boat, but when you've got these giant conflagration and you're paddling through an area and just see like hills burned right down to the bedrock, and all the soil is burned off too, and it's just these prehistoric, Hadean era rock outcrops. You're like,
have you read Hap Wilson's River of Fire? That book?
I have a problem with Hap Wilson. Yes. I have a problem with Hap Wilson claiming first descent of the Seal River, and that they were without a doubt the most skilled and prepared group to ever go down the Seal River, because I know lots of people who've gone down the Seal River, myself included, and I think I went down it before he did.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And so
there
was a certain hubris in that book, but man, did he get some fucking cool photos of them getting in the boat with the entire other shore in flames. So I'm jealous of the photos.
The book was very entertaining and kind of terrifying. For anyone listening to this that isn't familiar, he basically paddles down this very remote river during a humongous forest fire. They probably shouldn't have been on the river, but they were. And half the river was engulfed in flames, and they paddled through it. I would not want to be in that situation personally, but it made for an entertaining read.
The Seal is a gorgeous river. I've done it.
Yeah,
I've done it 3 times.
Oh, it's so high on my list.
Yeah, it's well, I can help you with that. That's
okay. It's great.
Yeah, it's one of the top rivers in Canada for sure. I did it last summer and saw 14 polar bears within 24 hours at the mouth of the river. So that was astounding.
Yeah.
And then paddling with the belugas out on Hudson Bay, it was life-changing.
Oh my goodness, I'm so jealous.
There was some self-congratulatory tire pump. And I know this is like a nerd fight here, like, and everybody has to pump their own tires. But that was a very you got some awesome pictures out of that. And Yeah,
Yeah.
be in a canoe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so that's one place where one thing I really like to communicate, especially because I have a blog and a little bit of an Instagram channel, is that like I try to claim like I do have experience and I feel qualified to tell people uh, how to canoe and how to camp. I've taken too many certifications to not feel comfortable telling someone the best practices, but I don't ever want someone to think that, or I never want to imply that I am the be all end all expert on anything. Like there's still so much that I'm learning, and I don't think that you ever really stop learning in something like backcountry camping. So
There is
being
no
able to
be all
say,
and
I don't, yeah,
end
I
all
don't know what to
expert in
do in a
anything.
forest fire.
Like,
So yeah,
especially in something as varied as the outdoors. I mean, maybe there is the be all end all expert in treating gallbladder infections. Maybe, right?
Specific example.
If you're like the world renowned expert in gallbladder infections, maybe your learning curve is going to slow down.
Yeah.
But if you're going to claim expertise in all things outdoors, really? Like,
yeah.
If you're just limited to North America, really, you're an expert at desert camping, and you're an expert at dealing with, I don't know, scorpions and
Yeah.
polar bears. And
Yeah, there are so many situations where it's like I have to be very diligent about communicating. Like, this is my wheel of expertise, and even inside this wheel, I am still learning. So I hope that makes people also feel like they can ask me their silly questions, because I also ask a lot of silly questions, and I still make a lot of mistakes. Occasionally, I'm still a gunnel grabber. Like, it doesn't happen very often anymore, but I was like 4 years into whitewater canoeing, and there's a great photo of me just one hand is on a paddle here, the other's on the gunnel. I've got a terrified look on my face.
Burn that photo. Burn that photo.
No, I post it on Instagram and I say, see, I'm still learning, and I'm going to own my mistakes. I know a lot of people don't want to share the things they're learning or the mistakes they're making, but I find them kind of entertaining. And I hope it makes other people comfortable asking me their silly questions, because they're not that silly.
No, and to some extent, an expert, if you want to give that, has just asked more silly questions earlier than you did.
Yeah, exactly.
And got that out of the way.
Yeah.
So then we've talked about sort of the scary things. Just to finish up here, what are the kind of luxuries, or what are the superfluous things that you take with you when you're canoeing? Obviously, backpacking, you're a bit more constrained for weight and space.
I'm an extremely ultralight backpacker.
So you're going backpacking tomorrow?
Yep.
For how long?
Just for a night. And then I have one next weekend as well.
And how much are you packing away?
My backpack right now, without food, is probably 16 pounds. And that's not including my camera gear. I do bring some camera gear, but it's literally just sleeping pad, sleeping bag, tent, stove. I bring clothes to sleep in, but I don't bring a change of clothes. Toiletries, first aid kit, staff phone. I think that's everything. So super lightweight with that. Canoeing, on the other hand, I'm a little bit of a diva. I've used a 60-liter personal barrel, so you can fit a lot into.
When you say personal barrel, what goes in your personal barrel?
So the sleeping bag, the sleeping pad, all that kind of, always a pillow, a camp chair. I like to either bring a reflector oven or a Dutch oven, because I love cooking.
You've made a reflector oven work? I've never made a reflector oven work.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I like them a lot. You need a good fire for it, though. I find Dutch ovens easier, but I got a reflector oven for Christmas a couple years ago and have a lot of fun with it. And
people are going to be wanting, what is a reflector oven and what is a Dutch oven? And why are these two people nerding out about?
A reflector oven is essentially I'm not sure who invented it. I really should know, because I'm very thankful to this guy who created it. But it's essentially a flat piece of metal that pops up into a little hexagon with a metal back. And something about its design means that when you place it against a fire, it heats up in a pretty even way, like the hot air circulates inside of it, and you can put a cake pan inside, or a pizza, or like a dish, and you have to rotate it halfway through, but it bakes really evenly, so it's kind of like you have an actual oven on trip. But it sits beside a fire. And a Dutch oven is pretty similar to a Dutch oven that you would use in an actual kitchen, except they're usually made out of either cast iron or aluminum. And you can put coals on top, and it sits on coals, so you don't put it right onto a flaming fire. Usually it's after the fire has started to die down a bit, where you put the coals on top. Some people bring coals. I've never understood that. But the thing that's nice about them is because they're thick, and if you're using cast iron, the way that heat transfers through them, it's quite gradual, so you don't burn the edges of the food. So you can also bake a lot of stuff inside a Dutch oven. So I've done like bread and cinnamon buns and quiche.
Wow, that's black belt level.
Oh yeah.
Camp cookery. I've got a Dutch oven. I don't think I've ever used it.
Really?
So, no.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
We'll have to. Where should I start? Bannock?
Yeah, Bannock, or just I can send you a bread recipe.
Okay.
I started using them because on my first Missinaba trip, we couldn't bring wraps for that long. So we started making bread on trip. And because we were already bringing it, I had to look up, what other things can I use this for? It's quite heavy. I better be getting my money's worth, but in money, I mean space. My space is worth. So yeah, learned to experiment a lot. I love cooking on trip. I don't like cooking in the real world. I don't cook at all in the real world. But on trip, I love it as a way to just get everyone around the fire. We chop things, we refresh the day, get a little bit of creativity. Like, my mom made this at home. Could I make this over a fire? Like, what ingredients would I have to sub out so that it doesn't go bad in the barrel? So I have a lot of fun with it.
See, I've thought about ultralight canoe camping, where you go absolutely minimalist, but in your canoe, so that you can travel further and faster, and that the portages are easier. So, like,
how many portages do you have on a river?
It depends. It depends if you're crossing watersheds or something.
If I'm solo, I bring a lot less stuff. I can see that.
No, if you've got your minions, I mean customers.
Yeah, or just friends. Yeah, that's, to be honest, besides the things I've said, I can't really think of anything else that I bring a lot of clothing. But I don't really think of it. I can't think of any other kind of luxury items that I bring. Have I gotten less of a diva?
You need to regain your diva status.
I know.
I
started calling myself. No, but I do swim every day, usually twice per day. And I wash my feet before bed every night. That's how I started. That's how I got my diva reputation.
Okay.
It's me
Bug
sitting
tarp?
by the... Pardon me?
Bug tarp? With a tarp with the mesh around the outside?
On trips with lots of people sometimes, but I don't have one personally. So
I'm just trying to think of other diva items.
I usually actually don't even bring a tarp. If I'm with a lot of people and someone else has a tarp, I'll bring it, but I don't own a tarp personally. I know that's...
No, I found that if I'm going solo, then it's too much weight. Mm-hmm. But if you're going with at least one other person, the tarp that's got the mesh around the outside that drops down if you're in mosquito country. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think Eureka makes one, and there's another one. And they're a luxury, but man, it's nice when you're in thick. Okay, so that's another question. How do you deal with bugs? Because you're in Ontario, and there are the black fly, the little black fly.
So I briefly want to touch on a story which really changed the way that I think about bugs on camping trips. In 2017, I was doing a whitewater course, and it was in May on the Magnetawan, and I got ravaged by black flies. Easily over 100 bites on my face and neck. I have photos for proof. I was unrecognizable. My face swelled up so big, I couldn't open one of my eyes. My neck was wider than my face. I was nauseous from how much toxin that gives you. And then I started a brand new job the next day. So that was an unfortunate bit. And that was actually at the time the most traumatic thing that had ever happened to me. It was like very deeply unsettling to have gone to the place that I love the most and been ravaged, unrecognizable by black flies. And then to be nauseous and unrecognizable for a week afterwards. It took about 2 weeks before my face looked normal again. And after that, immediately after, I was really terrified about bugs because I was just so afraid that that would happen again. And I was really irritated by them. So even a few mosquitoes, I got really agitated. But then when they started biting me, I just didn't have as much of a reaction to them. So in some ways, I'm kind of thankful for that experience, that I always bring a bug hat when I'm on trip because it's so light. Why not? But I don't react to mosquitoes very much anymore. And I don't really react to black fly bites as much anymore. So in some ways, I'm very fortunate now. But I would say for anyone who hasn't had the luxury of being attacked by 1,000 bugs, bug nets are amazing. I bring one on. In California, we don't really have bugs here like that. One of the great things about this state. But in Ontario, I bring them, even in autumn, all times of year, I always have a bug net with me, just in case.
And bug spray, or are you just pure bug net?
I bring bug cream, which is like 30% DEET. It's not good for you. And I put it on my wrists because my hands are exposed. But besides that, just the bug net. I used to put it on my forehead, kind of around my hairline. But I realized I probably shouldn't be putting that much DEET on my face. So now I just stick with the bug hat.
You've got a bunch of trip reports that do you sell those? Like if I'm thinking of going to do the Spanish River, can I buy not a guide? Well, a guide, but not a guide from you?
You don't buy the guide. So for background, I run my blog, voyagertripper.com. That's a free resource with 200 posts, a passion project. I love it. I also run tripreports.voyagertripper.com, which is a subscription website where people subscribe to it. It's $35 per year. So I tried to keep it like the cost of a guidebook, but one per year. And that has all of my trip reports and all of the trip reports that my outdoor community contributes. So I have a lot of friends who do really cool trips and are great writers, but they don't want to have their own blog, but they want to write about their trips. They all follow the exact same format and template because that was important to me. And they're all categorized so someone can filter on all the criteria that they're looking for in a trip and find them easily. And I don't sell them individually, but I do, since I compensate all of the writers who contribute reports, because it is I have a very high quality bar, so it's quite time intensive for people to write these reports for me. I compensate them financially. So to fund that, access to all my trip reports is through the subscription. We've got a little bit over 100 now on the site, and I add to them regularly. So that's my trip reports.
Trip reports are incredibly useful. Like you're going down a river or up a river, and you've got somebody saying, okay, as simple as the portage is on the right. Like that's really important when you're going down. Like, do you go on the left side and then find out it's on the right side? Now you're trying to traverse above a rapid. That can be a hairy situation.
Yeah, and I found that a lot of people go to the same destinations as other people because it's the ones that they're familiar with and it's the things they know how to type into Google. But those places get so much activity, you might not get the permits for them. Where else do you go? So I like that having so many trip reports, you can see them on a map and go, okay, this area is close to me. I've never heard of Kawartha. What's there? And then you can read some reports and get a feel for not just the stats, like here's how long it is, here's how many lakes there are, but you can get a feel of this is the experience that someone who went on this trip had. This was the level of difficulty. This was the kind of things that they experienced. And you can kind of see yourself in the trip a little bit and decide whether or not that's the kind of trip you want. And so by reading a few of those, you can get a sense of this is a location that I didn't know about, but it sounds like it would be really cool. I'm going to do more research and plan a trip there. So it gets people thinking about other regions that they hadn't necessarily thought of before. So I like it from that perspective too.
Reading trip reports and reading guidebooks and looking at maps is a very dangerous activity. The number of times that leads to some adventure in the future. I mean, it's probably something you should avoid if you don't want to start doing this stuff.
Yeah. One thing I like about backpacking is I feel like there's so much less planning and preparation that's needed a lot of the time. Like I saw a comment in a Facebook group today that said, looking for a trail close to this part of San Francisco. And someone said, what about this one? And then I Googled it. And 10 minutes later, I'd made a reservation because you just have to put on your boots and hike somewhere. So that's pretty easy. But I find that for canoe tripping, there's so many variables. and planning a route can be really difficult from scratch. And because there's so much more of that creativity, there's so many more decisions to make. And like knowing the quality of a portage is really important. Knowing whether a lake is big or not when you're factoring into, well, I might have to have a wind day because people are saying that this area gets really windy and that's a huge lake. Like that information is so helpful to know. So
it's the difference between going bouldering for the day and planning an expedition up some 7,000 meter peak, where it's not only the climbing, it's how do I get food there? How do I get there?
Yeah.
I mean, it's much more absorbing, but I would argue more rewarding.
Yeah, I should add in for any of the backpackers who are listening to this thinking, planning backpacking trips isn't always that easy. Definitely multi-day backpacking trips take a lot more coordination, especially if you've got shuttles involved or it's like really challenging terrain. So I should be careful how I speak about that. But
your blog is Voyager Tripper. It's not Voyager Hiker. So
which is awkward because I now live in California and mostly do hiking. And I've got a blog that most people can't spell. So didn't think that through, but oh well. I like the name. I'm not changing it.
No, well, those that matter don't mind, and those that mind don't matter, Mikaela.
Yeah. Actually, at one point I did post to everyone and said, like, guys, I'm like, so many people struggle to spell my blog name. Should I change it? Like, I'm not even there I'm not even French. Like, what should I do? And everyone said, no. Keep it. It's fine. It's like, okay. The people have spoken and I've never thought about it since. So
you've got the blog, you've got the trip report site, and your Instagram's pretty active as well. So that would be...
Yeah. Pardon me?
What would be your Instagram handle?
Oh, Voyager Tripper.
Oh, same.
But
Excellent.
awkwardly enough, it's spelled with an EU. So Voyager, the French way, which is what gets so confusing. I'm sure there are lots of emails I'm not receiving. But yeah, that's how people can find me. And then,
last question. What would be you said the seal is up on your dream trip. What would be if, I don't know, you win the perennial lottery?
Oh my goodness.
What is your dream canoe trip?
I really want to do the Mountain River. And
in the Northwest Territories.
Yeah, the Mountain River sounds incredible. I also want to do the Horton, though, even though that one doesn't have much whitewater. Apparently the wildlife there is incredible. The seal. I'd also like to do something in northern Quebec. So I have a trip report for the Broadback on my website that one of my friends did, and it just sounds like the most incredible river. So I'd like to do that one too. And then I've got like also lots of backpacking things. Like I want to do some in Nunavut and the Yukon. I want to go everywhere. If I won the lottery, I would probably never sleep in a house again. I just can't forever.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I hope that other people have enjoyed us geeking out about paddling and backpacking as much as I've enjoyed it. So
thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure.